The right wing is getting dumber, and it is by design. The elites have come to realize that in our democratic system, retaining power is as simple as creating a manipulable majority. The current plan of the elites is to use the right wing as an energy source through which they can propel themselves into power. As citizens, whether we are left, right, or center, it is in our interest to fight against this tendency. This means continuing to stay informed, continuing to participate in the system, and continuing to make our voices heard. As we enter the age of AI, the potentialities granted to the burgeoning authoritarian surveillance state are immense. I want to get into all of this, but first, let me talk about what led me to these conclusions. The first source of my ideas is a political theorist named Sheldon Wallen. Lately, I've been working my way through his work titled Politics and Vision. In his chapter on the politics of rationalism, he discusses the deep similarities between the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century and our modern liberal democracies. He says, quote, "The techniques of totalitarianism were described as, quote, mass propaganda, end quote, and dismissed at the time as certain to languish with the overthrow of the dictatorships. They became instead major tendencies in all politics of the latter half of the century, not least in the politics of liberal democracies. The difference would not be that the culture promoted by capitalist technology would prove less enveloping than Nazism, less of a regime from which there was no appeal, but that torture and terror were unnecessary. Domestically, they could as easily control the choice of candidates as of products, while cloning the citizen after the consumer, and integrating the latter with the new forms of communal bonding, cables, nets, and links. A crucial difference was that Nazism depended upon the constant mobilization of the population, while advancing capitalism merely required the demobilization of citizens into consumers, non-voters, and insecure workers. What Wallen is getting at here is that the differences between the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century and our current regimes are not differences in ends, but differences in means. In other words, our regime aims to exert total control as well. They simply do so by other means. Where the Nazis would control through mobilization, we opt for demobilization. Where the Nazis would control through politicization, we control through depoliticization. Where the Nazis aim to unite the citizens against a common enemy, we aim to divide the citizenry every which way, such that common action becomes impossible. In the end, the elites are left with a divided mass from which they can form a majority, incapable of independent thought and action. They have found this majority in the right wing. There exists a long line of research demonstrating the fact that liberals and those with left-wing views in general tend to have higher IQs than those on the right. However, the difference has not been extreme, and there are, of course, other factors at play here that are difficult to disentangle. That being said, things have only gotten worse for the right wing in recent years. I was reading a Substack article by Richard Hanania titled "Conservatives Still Don't Read, But Now Listen to Rogan." I recommend checking it out as it provides more details on the subject of epistemological weakness within the right wing than I will in this video. I will distill some of the findings here though. His article pulls from recently published research from Pew on differences in media consumption between the left and right. What the polls show is that the left is more diverse in its media consumption, both in terms of the medium of consumption, in other words, we read, and in terms of the sources we draw from. Right-wingers are not only extremely partisan in their consumption, but they also distrust nearly every major source of news. Even more terrifying is that Joe Rogan tied for the fourth largest news source for those on the right. Joe Rogan has been known to peddle genuine conspiracy theories. What does this mean for the right wing? When you have an entire side of the political aisle that thinks that Joe Rogan is serious news and refuses to read, how do you reach them? How can you explain the economic advantages of immigration to them? How can you elaborate on the incomprehensibility of a radical tariff plan in a way that mirrors the entertainment value of Rogan smoking pot? We are dealing with a side that continues to spiral lower and lower, and the beneficiaries of this unstoppable descent are those who wish to manipulate the right wing to gain power. You may be wondering how a dumb right wing benefits those seeking power. A perfect example can be given that links our popular friend Rogan with the recent election. Think back to the election and the push for RFK Jr. This was primarily driven by Rogan types and the followers of these figures. The depoliticization highlighted by Wallen is pertinent here. How bad have things gotten when the most political opinion someone possesses is that we should eradicate Red 40 from our food, or that we need beef tallow instead of seed oils. The elites have a much easier job if their task to win the support of their base is simply switching the method by which we cook burgers, as opposed to solving actual political issues. Perhaps no issue is more emblematic of the drive to stupefy the population than the recent attacks on the elite American universities by the Trump administration. What does it say about the administration when it freezes or threatens to withhold billions of dollars from Harvard, Cornell, Penn, Northwestern, and other elite educational institutions? What does it say when the administration slashes funding for cancer research? What about the funding cuts for our cutting-edge scientific research? This administration has made one thing abundantly clear: it opposes all things intellectual. The most effective and public pushback against the political order has been left-wing for years now. Whether it is the protests taking place across the campuses over geopolitical conflicts, or the recent ICE protest in LA, the left is consistently more resistant. This is not lost on the elites. The attacks on the intellectual institutions of our country will continue, as they attempt to reduce us all to the level of a Rogan viewer, to the level of a consumer that can be pacified with merely symbolic acts. If there's one thing I want you to take from all of this, it's that more than ever it's important to remain aware of the happenings in the world. Continue to read, continue to speak out, continue to find ways to act for the benefit of those around you and the communities in which you reside. We are set to enter an age full of disinformation fueled by AI and backed by governments around the world. Discernment is now more important than ever. The recent playing up of the LA protest is a perfect example of how the elites will inflame the manipulable constituents that elect them in an attempt to bolster their position. In the end, all we can do is stay informed and stay vigilant. Lastly, I want to say that not all right-wingers are dumb. Some are, in fact, very smart. But the issue is becoming more pervasive on the right wing specifically. If you are on the right wing, it is also in your interest to maintain epistemological standards. It is in your interest to prevent the capture of your side. I do not consider myself a hyper-partisan person, but lately, I'm finding it difficult to pretend that any kind of parity exists between the right and left wings today.